Hey YouTube. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about privilege and specifically about the kind of toxic buildup, the like crud that we can get inside ourselves around privilege. Um, so obviously being privileged doesn't necessarily produce a lot of trauma and pain. Like that comes from not being privileged, that comes from being oppressed. Um, but it is also not a clean experience. Privilege can build up a lot of stuff in terms of um, false beliefs, in terms of wounds that you have caused for others, so harm that you have perpetrated, um, false beliefs and like assumptions that you have, the kind of implicit bias you hold, like all the things that being privileged in a society where one or more of your identities is privileged, I think does create a lot of cruft that we don't always like think about or talk about. Of course, we don't want to center whiteness or center maleness or center privileged identities, but at the same time, it is important, I think, for folks who are privileged, and especially with others who are privileged in the same way, for us to address the buildup and the stuff that is caused because, you know, in a lot of ways, like for example, racism isn't people of color's problem. Racism is our problem. Racism is white people's problem. Like that, like we are creating the harm, and we need to address the harm. And part of how we need to address the harm is all the stuff that we carry around ourselves. Like I kind of think of this metaphor, like if you're a visual thinker, of standing there in this like giant suit of armor that is made of all this random crap that you have assembled onto yourself and being like, you know, great, okay, so I'm privileged. Like, what do I have to let go of out of all this stuff that I have on me? I think tarot, spiritual practice, you know, shadow work can be really useful in examining and interrogating what is on this suit of armor that we've built up to protect ourselves and keep ourselves in power, and figuring out how do we let go of it piece by piece. How do we confront each piece, see it, acknowledge it, be aware of it, be aware of our resistance to let go, be aware of our desire to hold on to each piece, and then work with it on its own individually, like nurture our feelings around it, not in a way of saying like racism is okay or like you should hold on, but nurture in the sense of acknowledging that like feelings and emotions are real, and if we deny them, that's not going to help. But if we see them and see where they come from and see the context around them, that we can start to shift beliefs and start to take those false beliefs off of our armor and start to realize that we've built up way more than we need, because we are actually very safe as privileged people. And of course it's complicated by intersectionality, and we're not always safe in all areas, but we also don't want to use like as a shield our other identities. Like sometimes part of our armor can be like I'm white but I'm gay, and so therefore like being gay it absolves me somehow of my white privilege, but it does not. And so like that's another thing to pick at. I think it's important for there to be spaces and to find people with whom you can process these things, people who share identity with you and are supportive in a way that is not like just telling you that everything's okay and like all comforting, but can sit with you in the discomfort and help you to recognize that discomfort is an important part of processing pain, and something that we need to do, and it's our responsibility to do if we're to get past these societal wounds and the harm that we cause to other people. So you can do this kind of work through a lot of different things, through tarot, through shadow work. One book that I'm currently in the middle of that I'm really finding useful is called My Grandmother's Hands. Let me get the full title. So it's My Grandmother's Hands, Racialized Trauma and the Pathway to Mending Our Hearts and Bodies. And this is by Resmaa Menakem. This book is really interesting because it starts for everyone, and then there are sections for specific people, but it talks about the embodied trauma, ancestral trauma, generational trauma in black bodies, in white bodies, and in police bodies, regardless of race. So obviously multiples of those can apply. And talks about confronting the built-up trauma. In the case of white people, the not both the trauma of perpetration and like what it means to be harming others generation after generation, but also how that started from white people harming white people, and like how the violence and the trauma of our group has carried on even before enslavement and even before like contact with non-white people. It's really interesting. There's a lot of like somatic practice exercises to do in the book. It's recommended to not skip those, to like stop reading and wait till you have a chance where you can do the body practice and then move on. And that is one way. Somatics is a great way to address that built up armor of privilege and to address like everything we're holding in our bodies around it. So if you have a chance to work, I know the generative somatics is one group that's really cool. If you have a chance to do somatics work, I would recommend it. So if you have thoughts about this, you can feel free to leave a comment, and of course don't forget to subscribe if you're not already.